What lurks within the dark past of Vermont? Does the past leave behind residual or intelligent spirits? Or can there be things more darker than what we can see or feel? I'm Tessa Baker, and this is Haunted Vermont. Tonight's episode will be the season finale of Haunted Vermont. The topic of discussion tonight is the Eddy Brothers. A little bit of biography on the brothers. The brothers were sons of Zephaniah Eddy and his wife Julia McCombs, natives of Vermont. It was claimed that their family could be traced back to the Salem witch trials and that they had a long history of psychic ability. Growing up on a small farm near Chittenden, Vermont, both brothers claimed to have exhibited strong psychic abilities from an early age. Both the sons took up mediumship and held séances. They claimed to perform ectoplasm materializations and communicate with spirit guides. William would work in a séance cabinet on occasion, and his brother Horatio would sit outside on a cloth screen where they would claim spirits would play musical instruments behind the screen. In 1870, William and Horatio were living with their widowed mother Julia in Chittenden. There, the Eddy family opened a small inn called the Green Tavern. In addition to lodging travelers, the Green Tavern was also the spot of regularly scheduled séances that the brothers put on for visitors from around the world. A typical séance of the Eddy brothers would have the audience gathered in a circle room in the tavern. One of the brothers would enter a special spirit box at the front of the room, essentially just a small room with a chair in it, and lapse into a deep trance, at which point the show would start. It was alleged that the instruments would start playing on their own. Various noises could be heard and strange lights would be seen. According to the newspaper and spiritualist accounts of 1874, some very strange things were happening on a small Vermont farm near the town of Chittenden. Allegedly, all manner of bizarre phenomenon was said to be taking place in the home of William and Horatio Eddy, two middle-aged, illiterate brothers, and their sister Mary. The Eddys lived in an unkept two-story building that was reported to be infested with supernatural beings of such numbers that had never been reported before or since. The events at the farm were said to be so powerful and so strange that the people came from all over the world to witness them. Spiritualists began calling Chittenden the spirit capital of the universe. Needless to say, not everyone was convinced of the legitimacy of the reported events on the Eddy farm. Once such a man was a successful attorney named Henry Steele Olcott. Prior to hearing of the Eddy brothers, Olcott had no interest whatsoever in the burgeoning spiritualist movement. However, one day as he returned to his office from lunch, he picked up a copy of the spiritualist newspaper, The Banner of Light. In the paper, he read a graphic account of the strange happenings that were being reported in Chittenden, Vermont. It is unlikely at the time that Olcott had any idea how a simple newspaper article was going to change his life. It is important that we establish the fact that Henry Olcott was not connected in any way to the spiritualist movement, nor was he a proponent of the paranormal. What might have prompted him to pick up a copy of the Banner of Light that day is unknown. Olcott was born in New Jersey in 1832 and attended a college in New York City, studying agricultural science. While still in his early 20s, he received agricultural recognition for his work on a model farm and for founding a school for agricultural students. During this time, he published 3 scientific works. He went on to become the farm editor for Horace Greeley's newspaper and the New York Tribune. After buying a copy of the Spiritualist newspaper, Olcott read with interest the reports from the Eddy Farm. Although skeptical, he knew that if the stories were true, this was the most important fact in the modern physical science, he later wrote. A short time after reading the story, Colonel Olcott traveled to Vermont, accompanied by a newspaper artist named Alfred Capes. Together, they planned to investigate the strange events at the Eddy Farm, and if the stories were a hoax, they would expose the Eddy brothers in the daily graphic newspaper as nothing but charlatans. If the Eddys were true mediums, Olcott would announce the validity of spiritualism to the world. In either event, Olcott was determined to be fair and open-minded in his judgments. Olcott and Capes traveled to the secluded town of Chittenden, located within the Green Mountains. The trip out to the farm was uneventful, but the first meeting with the Eddy brothers was anything but ordinary. The 2 distant and unfriendly farmers were rough-hewn characters with dark hair and eyes, and New England accents so thick the New York attorney and writer could scarcely understand them. Olcott would later learn that the brothers were descended from a long line of psychics. Mary Bradbury, a distant relative, had been convicted of witchcraft in Salem in 1692. She had escaped the village with the help of friends. Their own grandmother had been blessed with the gift of second sight and often went into trances speaking to entities that no one else could see. Their mother, Julia, had been known for frightening her neighbors with predictions and visions, although her husband, Zephiah, condemned her powers as the work of the devil. Julia quickly learned to hide her gifts from the cruel and abusive man. However, the supernatural could not be hidden once the couple began having children. Strange poundings began shaking the house. Disembodied voices were heard in empty rooms, and occasionally the children even vanished from their cribs. They were likely to be discovered anywhere in the house or even outside. As William and Horatio got older, their strange powers strengthened. On many occasions, Sophia would see the boys playing with unfamiliar children, who would vanish whenever he approached. When these visitors vanished, he would take his boys to the barn and beat them with a rawhide whip as punishment. The strange children returned again and again, though earning the young Eddy boys countless beatings. Eventually, they would grow to both fear and hate their father. The boys soon learned that they were unable to attend school. The initial attempts were marked by inexplicable happenings and disturbances as invisible hands threw books, levitated desks, and caused objects like rulers, inkwells, and slates to fly about the room. Zephiah tried everything he could to stop the disturbances, although this mostly consisted of him beating and abusing the youngsters. The strange events continued, though. When he realized that he couldn't stop the weird antics, he grew furious. Each time the boys fell into a trance, he would berate and verbally abuse them. He would try to rouse them by pinching and slapping them until they were black and blue. Once on the advice of a sympathetic Christian friend, he doused the boys with boiling water. When this didn't work, he also allowed his friend to drop a red-hot coal into William's hand. He had hoped to exorcise his devils. The boy never awakened from his trance, but he bore a scar on his palm for the rest of his life. On occasion, though, the spirits would attempt to defend the boys, appearing in front of Zephiah and scaring him from the house. Needless to say, these eerie and frustrating happenings were more than the man could stand. So trying of the boys, but realizing their money-making potential, he sold the Eddy brothers to a traveling showman, who for the next 14 years took them all over America, Canada, and Europe. As part of the performance, he would challenge audience members to try to awaken the boys from their trances. These audiences made their father abuse look tame. The Eddys were locked into a small wooden boxes to see if they could escape, and hot wax was poured into their mouths to see if they could produce spirit voices. When they were unable to talk, the skeptics poked and prodded and punched the sleeping brothers, leaving them scarred and damaged for the rest of their lives. On several occasions, they were even stoned and shot at by angry mobs. William Eddy bore a number of bullet scars on his body. According to the writer John Mason, they were mobbed in Lynn, Massachusetts, and stoned in South Danvers. On a second trip to Danvers, they were shot at. They were ridden on the rail out of Cleveland and barely escaped a coat of tar and feathers. Only after their father died were the boys able to return home. They were moved into the family farm with their sister Mary and opened the house as a modest inn called the Green Tavern. These things were all learned later. On his arrival, Olcott was only able to gain the first impression of the belligerent and unfriendly men. They were certainly not the deceitful con men he had expected. So what were they? On Olcott's first day at the farm, he was a witness to the outdoor séance. In the bright moonlight of the warm summer evening, a group of 10 participants traveled down a path into the deep ravine. They assembled in front of a natural cave formed by 2 large stones that had collapsed atop one another, forming an arch. Olcott later learned that it was called Honto's Cave in honor of the Native American spirit who often appeared there. Olcott suspiciously investigated the cave, but that no exit could be found at the back of the rocks. He determined that there was no way that anyone could slip in or out of the cave without being seen. Horatio Eddy acted as the medium for the séance. He sat on a camp stool under the arch and then was draped in a makeshift spirit cabinet, formed by shawls and branches that had been cut from small saplings. As Horatio rested there, a gigantic man dressed as a Native American emerged from the darkness of the cave. While the medium addressed the spirit, someone cried out and pointed up toward the top of the cave. Standing there, silhouetted against the moon, was another gigantic Indian. To the right, another spectral female had materialized on the ledge. In all, 10 such figures appeared during the séance. The last, the spirit of William White, the late editor of the Spiritualist newspaper, emerged from within Horatio's cabinet. He was dressed in a black suit and white shirt, was supposedly recognizable to someone who had read the newspaper and recognized his picture from it. He vanished at the same time the others did, moments later. Horatio appeared from the cabinet and signaled the séance was at an end. After the bizarre display was over, Olcott and Capps carefully searched the cave and the surrounding area for footprints in the soft earth. They found no trace that anyone had been there. Olcott found the séance to be convincing, but was sure that he would be able to more than easily detect a fraud within the controlled setting of the Eddy house. He and Capes thoroughly examined the large circle room, which was located on the second floor of the farmhouse. He drew maps, charts, and diagrams and took numerous measurements, sure that he would find false panels, secret doors, or hidden passages. However, he found nothing out of the ordinary. He was determined not to give up, though he convinced the newspaper to hire men to come to Chittenden and to examine the place using carpenters and engineers as consultants. Another thorough search was conducted. The experts found nothing strange. After this, Olcott and Capes were finally convinced that the walls and the floors were as solid as they seemed. Because of this, what Olcott witnessed during the nights that followed became even stranger. Each séance was basically the same. On every night of the week, except for Sunday, guests and visitors would assemble on the wooden benches in the séance room. A platform which had been assembled there was lit only by a kerosene lamp recessed in a barrel. William Eddy, who acted as the primary medium, mounted the platform and entered a small cabinet. A few moments later, soft voices began to whisper in the distance. Often it would be singing accompanied by spectral music. Musical instruments came to life and soared above the heads of the audience members. Disembodied hands appeared, waving and touching the spectators, and odd lights and unexplained noises appeared and filled the air. Then the first spirit form emerged from the cabinet. They came one at a time or all in groups, numbering as many as 20 to 30 in the evening. Some were completely visible and seemed solid. Others were transparent and ethereal. Regardless, they awed the frightened spectators. The spirits ranged in size from over 6 feet to very small. It's worth noting here that William Eddy was only 5 feet 9 inches tall. Most of the ghostly apparitions were elderly Yankees or Native Americans, but mainly other races and nationalities also appeared in costume, like Africans and Russians, Orientals, and more. Where they had come from, Olcott pondered. He explained that the spirit cabinet and platform had found no trapdoors nor hidden passages. In fact, there was no room in the cabinet for anyone other than the medium himself. Olcott was familiar with the workings of the stage magicians and fraudulent mediums, but could find none of their tricks present in the Eddy house. The apparitions not only appeared, but they also performed, sang, chatted with the sitters. They also produced spirit articles like musical instruments, clothing, and scarves. In all, nearly every type of supernatural phenomenon was reported at the Eddy farmhouse. These included rappings, moving physical objects, spirit paintings, automatic writing, prophecy, speaking in tongues, healings, unseen voices, levitation, remote visions, teleportation, and more. And of course, the full-bodied manifestations, of which Olcott observed more than 400 during the week he visited the house. He concluded that a show like that which he had seen would have required an entire company of actors and several trunks of costumes here. Yet Olcott's inspection of the premises revealed no place to hide either actors or props. The idea of stage actors was further dispelled by the convincing manner of the spirits. One woman spoke in Russian to the alleged spirit of her deceased husband. A number of other dialects were also heard. How was this possible when the Eddys could barely read and write? and were scarcely capable of speaking coherent English. In addition, such an elaborate show would have cost a fortune to produce each night. They would have had to pay actors, invest in costumes, and hire someone to create the marvels of the spirits. This would have been impossible given that the brothers were almost penniless. Most of the visitors who had came to the farm did not pay, and the rest only gave $8 per week for room and board at the inn. No admission was ever charged for the séances. In Olcott's mind, fraud would have been physically and financially impossible. The investigators' 10-week stay on the Eddy farm was surely a test of endurance. He left disliking the house, the food, the weather, and the Eddy brothers. However, he was convinced of the fact that the two men could make contact with the dead. Not only did Colonel Olcott chronicle his visit in the newspaper, but he also wrote a massive book called The People from Other Worlds. The book, over 500 pages long, is full of precise drawings of the apparitions, the grounds, the house, and even detailed plans of the construction, proving that no hidden passages existed. You had done sort of like your own little investigation of the Eddy brothers, and you actually were able to capture some evidence of them. Would you like to talk about it?
Sure. So, yeah, back when I used to do paranormal investigations with the Vermont Investigators of Paranormal Activity, VIPA, however you want to call it, or call it back then, it would VIPA for short. But, yeah, there was one night in July of 2012 where I set out with my recorder to see if I could contact either Eddy or William. I kind of just wanted to see if they were still around because of the fact that now, which, as Tessa was mentioning, that the farmhouse was known as the Green Tavern, it's actually now being run by people in New Jersey that are remodeling it, keeping the old farmhouse alive, by the club, the High Life Ski Lodge, or Ski Club, I forget how they worded it, but it's like High Life Ski Lodge or Ski Club. Very nice people, depending on who you talk to. I've only been into the house twice. By some of the people that lived there, they offered to let us come in when I wasn't really looking to really just bug the people that worked there. It was more of just taking some photos and that's it. But I got offered to actually go inside of the farmhouse to see the restoration of the place, which is very nice. But anyway, so back about the EVP here. So yeah, so one night I went out to where they are buried in Chittenden, and I started talking about them. While recording, it was just me. Everybody else that was with me was not talking at all. And if they were talking, I started over of what I was saying, just so that I knew if anything came into play, it would either be me or something else, and not everybody else that was with me. But anyway, so instead of just talking really too much about it, this clip is just pretty much me talking about how I felt sorry for the Eddy brothers, of how they were treated, about getting sold to the circus at a young age and stuff like that. And then I tried to say something about like how they were different and had like supernatural abilities, but in the clip that is about to go on, you can tell that it seems somebody was trying to correct me.
I'm very sorry what your parents did to you, that they sold you to the circus because you were different from everybody else with your powers of the supernatural.
Well, thank you for that. It's pretty interesting. You've shown me the clip before, and I've heard it, and I have to say that's pretty good evidence. With closing thoughts on this season finale episode, I would like to read something from People from the Other World by Henry Steele Olcott. And now I turn my face away from Chittenden and close the record of my interesting experiences at the place, leaving each reader to digest the facts and form a belief for himself. I doubt if 3 more memorable months were ever passed by anyone. And in future years, I shall never be able to recall the secluded farmhouse and its ghostly memories without thinking of Todd Hood's verse. And over all there hung a shade of fear, a sense of mystery the spirit daunted, and said as plain as whisper in the ear, "The place is haunted." Thank you guys very much for listening. Hope you guys enjoyed the season finale of Haunted Vermont. Let us know how we did and if we should keep going. If you enjoyed this episode and want to support, head over to our Patreon at www.patreon.com/Haunted Vermont, where you can pledge $1 a month or more and receive rewards every month you pledge, ad-free and listening to the episodes before the public. Pledging more grants you access to the show where you can share your own stories and experiences on future episodes. I already fund another podcast 100%, so I'm asking help for this one. At least season 1 will have a total of 6 episodes, and then it'll depend on funds after that. Thank you for listening.